So, hey, everyone in attendance at this present moment at this session. This is the Network Effect Drives Racial Inequality. I'm Chris Wink. I'm the technical CEO. We're waiting on Nasir Qadree. We're having some tech fails here at the moment, to be real with you. So what's going to happen is we're going to introduce to you what our goal is here. I'm going to introduce my dear colleague, Michelle Graham. We're going to introduce Kelly Hoey. Sorry. But to set us up, we're doing this as a live recording for a podcast that technically did last year called Off the Sidelines, which was a investor education series. So I'm gonna basically bring up Michelle and Kelly, get them kind of started, and Nasir, our final panelist, is going to join us, because fortunately, Michelle, you've done tons of reporting on how connections happen between entrepreneur and investor. Kelly, you have a new book out that's dedicated to the idea of networking, how one builds network, which means a lot of things, but can also mean network effect. So first, thanks for joining us.
Hey, it's awesome to be here. Am I supposed to be pushing that red button and recording on my yes, okay. We'll make that happen too. All right. I think this is happening.
Kelly's going to record on voice memos, and Michelle is also going to do the same, because this will end up. This is how content is made. So you're basically going to see a live thing of what will end up in a produced episode of a podcast that we had the first season of last year, and we'll bring back next year. So Kelly, but the book's out, right? Your relatively new book.
Yeah. I mean, thank God people get networking wrong, because the book keeps selling. So the book is called Build Your Dream Network: Forging Powerful Relationships in a Hyper-Connected World. Audio book, paperback, hardcover, Kindle, all the works. And the lessons that I put in that book when it came out in 2017, 2018 still hold true today. And perhaps people realizing in this time that we are so isolated physically, that networks are more or even maybe people waking up to how valuable they are, and why it's really important that we pay attention to our digital footprint, our structure of our networks as well, because this isn't secondary anymore. This is not something you can just pick up on the fly because there's a meetup or something to go to. This is something you got to pay attention to every single day.
That's right. And Michelle, you technically reporter, journalist, so you have a lot of conversations about how relationships happen, in this case between entrepreneur and investor, entrepreneur and partner. That's true, right? I'm not lying about that.
Yeah, correct. I think more recently, I'm not going to crack jokes about you just yet. More recently, right, I think I've talked to you a bit about this, but I'm just interested in, of course, Black founders, how they land these investments, and how to get more people in the room that look like Black founders who are investors. And getting them up to speed with just sitting on, different investor pools. I recently was just digging on a story. Basically, this angel investor group is all white men, and I told the founder of this group, we had a very candid conversation, that if I was an entrepreneur walking in the room, I'd be intimidated. I'd probably lose my train of thought, because no one's sitting in front of me that I'm trying to convince that my idea is important and I need money to support it. None of them look like me. So yeah, transparency and finding out even how, investor groups and angel investor groups are just built for different incubators and accelerators going on in DC has been something I've been very interested as of lately.
And Kelly, this is something that I know I've heard you, we've had interviews in the past. I know this idea of network effect comes up in a lot of ways. You both give tactical skills of what does it mean to actually build a network, to start in any environment in lots of forms. But I've also heard you speak about the lack of female entrepreneurship and network effect that happens there too. I wonder how much you've seen your advice around networking, how much that has translated to network effect issues, and maybe how do you think about those two things as separate matters?
Well, so let's when we talk about network effects, you got to think about, the ability for ideas to spread. as well as to be adopted. Think of like a platform like Twitter relied on a network effect. In terms of, you and I use it and then we tell other people. You think of technically, people say, hey, I'm using this, you should come and use this. And so that's what you get the network effect. But we're also talking about with this, we're talking about network gaps. And there is the gap that we're talking about where people don't have the networks, right? And you think about a founder who doesn't look like a room of white men, their gap to get into that room. But we also have to look at the investor side of it. They have a massive blind spot, right? Because their networks probably look like them. And that is really kind of critical where we sort of start thinking of where does invention come from? Let me talk about this kind of stuff. The old what you can't be, what you can't see kind of ideas. If we look at invention right now based on holding patents, because that's an easy, sort of a good part.
Right.
82% of patents right now are held by white men in their 40s.
Mm.
That's like, those can't be the only inventors.
Right. Right.
Time out, wrong answer, right? Here's the other thing because some of this, like, I feel there's an incredible burden on founders, particularly undervalued and overlooked founders, like the amount of advice dished on them on what they need to do to bust into networks, right? So that they benefit from these network effects. But I want to look at it from the perspective of those with the network, right? So those with the money, right? Typically the white investors who are male, who are thinking, oh, I know everything. I'm in the pinnacle of information flows. All right, dial your mind back. Where were you in August of 2003?
Do you want an actual answer? I was in high school.
Okay, and what happened in August of 2003? We were all sitting in the dark for a period of time because the power grid on the East Coast. Remember when the power grid went down? And the reason, okay, we all sat in the dark for a while. Okay, I was in the
West Coast. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, okay. Right. We were sitting in the dark on the East Coast. Why? Because of a network failure, and it wasn't it was a massive network failure, but it wasn't a widespread failure. It was one or two nodes that went down, but a structural design problem took out the entire network. So you think about it in a human perspective, right? You haunchity VC who relies on one or two nodes, right? That's a structural failure. You lose a connection, or that connection also stays narrow. You're never going to get sort of this widespread and benefit from a widespread network effect of getting new ideas and new possibilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that patent number, I want to go back to that. I think I'm going to forget now here. We just saw a group of researchers try to put a number to the economic cost of racism. And some of the numbers that they've used are like largely based on the prediction of what level of income mobility do patent holders often have. Like, where are you at your life when you can get lost in the garage with an idea? Mm-hmm. Some of it goes back to purchasing power and the like. But when we think about racial inequality, or actually, let me say it like this. One of the struggles that I've had reporting, and I'd be curious the two of you guys speak to this, is so often we do have a degree of an investor class and an entrepreneur class that essentially says, like, I'm doing my job. I'm not racist. I'm not actively causing problems. that is like where the heart of network effect happens, right? Like, can we get at like that? It's the idea of like Angela Davis's sense of anti-racism, the difference between not actively doing anything bad as opposed to not actively doing anything good, and how that shows up in some of our understanding of network effect. When you're not actively trying to break down your network itself is making a decision for you.
Yeah.
It's kind of a clumsy question, but yeah.
I know how to work through your smoke and mirrors. Don't worry.
Right.
I think if you're neutral, you're on the side of the oppressor. Like you're siding with that. Like I think we, in all different types of conversations we're having right now on the helms of racial inequity and the civil unrest and everything going on, you can't be neutral in these discussions. You can't be neutral in these rooms. So I feel like for the people who are like, I'm not doing bad things, but I'm also not pushing forward, an agenda or supporting, something specifically, you might as well be doing the bad stuff, in my opinion.
Right. I think it's as soon as you think you have all the connections, it's like assuming you have all the answers. As soon as you allow yourself to be in that space or utter those words, then you need to go and check yourself. I remember back, so it would have been sort of 2011, 2012, when I had co-founded a startup accelerator. And I remember talking to a VC who said to me, well, I see everything. And it was, straight white dude, well-intentioned, became one of the greatest mentors of our accelerator. But I was looking at him thinking, tell me how you are seeing every female-founded mobile venture, like, tell me how you're doing that. Like, that's what was running through my head. But his attitude was, well, I see everything that's like worth investing in. So why do we need another accelerator? And as soon as you think that way, you've lost it. Like you've lost, your I think you've lost your way. I think we always need to be kind of, checking our attitudes, and for the health of our own, you think of a VC perspective, from the health of your own investment pipeline, you're going to be checking the health of your network on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. What can you say more? Like, what do you mean by health? What does the health mean? Well, I mean,
one of these things, you write a book on networking and everyone's like, I know how to work a room, right? Or I know how to set up a Twitter account, right? And then no. Like, the book is called, Build Your Dream Network, not Make Networking a Dream. It's like, what is the structure and composition of your network so that it is, I want to say, fueling whatever your professional career startup ventures are? And do you have, there's sort of two structures to a network. There are the deep, close relationships, and then there are the broad, shallow relationships. And those broad, shallow relationships are the ones where you get ideas to travel further. So do you have the fullest extent of diversity, right? You may not have a depth of relationships, but do you have a full degree of diversity in every shape and form? From, gender, sexual orientation, geography, title, industry, like you need all of that kind of stuff in your network. There's that great game that people play, the 6 degrees of separation, the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, that kind of stuff. Too many people end up with that narrow, deep network. That's all they've got. And that, in essence, is an echo chamber. So if you think from the VC perspective and not checking the health of your network, you could get to, you think some VCs, they can get to anybody in the VC industry. But if they want some different idea, they're still stuck in that very narrow, deep. I'm glad you can pick up the phone and get Mark Andreessen on the phone, or I'm glad you can pick up the phone and get Steve Case on the phone. Can you get, fill in the blank, someone else? You may not be getting the rich diversity of investments because everyone you're talking to also knows each other. So it may look like a very impressive network you have because you got all these bold-faced names. But if you're just talking to each other, this is a gold-plated echo chamber, and that doesn't get you very far. So in terms of like your network, you can't just think of, hey, do I have a great elevator pitch and can I work a room, whether it's digital or in person? It's like, what's the health and the structure of my network? Do I have trusted people I can, talk to? And do I have enough diversity in a broader network that I can tap in to get into their diverse networks?
Yeah, I want to echo that for a second, Chris. So I was talking about, I was just getting interested in how these networks are built. I straight up asked an investor, who was part of an angel group that was all white men, and yet half of their accelerator class, who eventually was going to be pitching to these people, were 50% women-owned and Black-owned businesses. And I was like, how can you have that and you don't have anybody on your investor panel that looks like them? Like, what was the networking like in order to, what did it look like? I just genuinely was curious, like, how did you get to this point of having 12 white men on this angel investor group? And he was like, well, that's my network. Those are the people that I know. And I'm like, well, where are you networking? And what needs to change? And I'm asking in the sense that clearly this is a trend going on where you only are attracting people who look like you, not doing anything good, but also not doing anything bad in your eyes, because you're just pulling from what you already know. But you need to dig deeper. You need to network differently. You need to attract different types of people. But also, are you afraid? Like, is it intimidating? I don't know at this point. But yeah, that's interesting.
One of the most, like, in investor Twitter over much of this year, there's been there's been like a call for the death of the warm intro, and it's complicated in my mind. Like, there's two tracks, right? There is, hey, I get a lot of volume of inquiry, and it's hard in a 125 word email to validate this. We all as individuals understand the idea of a warm intro. If you're at like a party and a friend says, hey, here's my friend, there's a degree of, okay, I understand there's some degree of vetting. I can approach this differently. But in investor Twitter and in heavily white male communities, there's that conversation of, well, then it becomes very self-fulfilling that if most of your network is already white male, if you're more willing to take a pitch from someone who's done a warm intro, you're more likely to get that like same community around. And so I both get breaking out of warm intro. I also understand that at the end of the day, that is like how all of us operate, like at a party. There's like a very human element of what like a warm intro is. And so I guess maybe we're just saying there's a difference between you at a party and you doing your job. And maybe, sure, you at a party, warm intro does something, but when you're trying to break your network effect, you need to do something active. And warm intro is being perceived as this like representative evil of it. It's messy, though. I wonder if you guys have thoughts on that, the warm intro.
Well, we still have Neanderthal brains. Someone lands in your inbox, or someone is coming towards you at a party. Are they friend or foe? And when they are introduced by someone we know, right, that cuts through like that trust barrier. Like, okay, they're not going to come and attack me, kind of thing. Like that, all of a sudden you're listening and you're hearing differently because their bona fides have been kind of accounted for. There's that. So I think the warm intro remains really, really critical. And I don't think, lots of our brains have been rewired, but that piece hasn't. I think the piece we don't talk about, Chris, in the startup world, the key thing I know, yes, investors want a warm intro, but who do they want the warm intro from? And they want it from someone in their network, but it's not necessarily the most trusted warm intro in the investment pipeline is from a startup founder, which then signals to me for startup founders, you have to stop pitting yourself against other startup founders. We're too busy in like sort of the networking world of trying to build relationships with the muckety mucks at the top. Right? Whether that's a VC or if you're, CEO or whatever. And we overlook the most critical network, which is your peers. So for startup founders, your best bet is to getting to know other startup founders. Because if they say, damn, like this person's got a great idea and their work ethic is out of control and their team is the most creative and collaborative. If I'm a VC and I'm hearing this from a startup founder, I'm going to sit up and pay attention. But another investor going, oh yeah, there's this great startup, you should talk to them. You know, like you hear that all the time.
Interesting. Well, I mean, Michelet, I'd almost like challenge you or us, because journalists do operate on the warm intro as much as investors.
Yeah, we do. But also we have to be comfortable with not having that and still kind of going for it. So I guess it's not opposite of Kelly's, but also is vouching for that. You might just have to dive in sometimes and try to build that network or connection yourself. Also depending on who it is though, or their history of accepting that type of communication. For me, I will say like the warm intro, when people reach out to me for stories and things, like automatically if I see somebody's, name in the email or I'll get a text message that says, hey, and it'll be from like Kelly said, from other startup founders introing me to another founder, like doing something in the same space or just trying to kind of be that connector. Had that startup founder reach up to me by themselves and send me this long email, I probably wouldn't have gotten to it as fast as someone I already know that's well connected in my network. Shoot me a quick text like, hey, I want to introduce this new founder. They got this cool idea and they align great with what you guys are doing at Technically. It'd be worth a story. Like, I'm all for that. And in more cases, more than not, I will go for that story more than I would go for the email that's 3 paragraphs long, because this person already knows how I communicate, the person who sent me the text message. So it's 2-tier. But also as a reporter, I cold email, LinkedIn, tweet, DM. If I can find a phone number, you're in trouble. Like, I mean, it's just, it depends on how people like to be communicated with. But if I don't know, I have to dive in and I have to figure it out myself.
But I also think you're hitting on something, when people are reaching out, so you don't have that warm intro, how are you reaching out? And ad nauseum, I talk to people like, you got to put yourself in the other person's shoes, right? And so, thinking about particularly reaching out to a journalist and part of that outreach to a journalist might be the responding to a journalist, like understanding their job, what it is they need, how you can help them be successful. I remember years ago, and I use this example all the time, someone reached out to me looking for a warm intro to Chris Freilich at First Round. So a startup founder said, hey, I know this other founder and Chris would be an amazing investor. Can you make the intro? And I said to this founder, I said, I could, but you tell me why he wants to hear from you. Like, I know he's a good investor for you, but why are you a good investment for him? You tell me that, and then I'll reach out to Chris and see if he wants the intro. Anyway, that was about 8 years ago, and I'm still waiting for the email. So that's the other thing, right? Like this, I say this to people all the time: do your homework, right? Like, you want to bust through the noise. You don't want the 3 paragraphs like, oh, could you write about me? It'd be terrific, and I really love Technically, and it's like you got to reach out and say, here's how I can solve your problem.
Mm-hmm. What
I love that.
Agreed. Yeah, and I think there is. The warm intro for me is just like, it is the most symbolic way. It's like the battleground of us understanding network effect right now. I see in the chat, Matt Managrassi mentioned like how other cultures can approach that differently. I mean, from the written letter of introduction when you were going to a different town, like in medieval times, to any time, there's a degree of that we look for. Some of the correspondence that I've seen is as the web will change behaviors. Like, if over time the web allows you to have a longer and more transparent backstory, it's easier for you to be tracked and traced. And so I think there's a techno optimist view that we should try to curtail the importance of that Neanderthal brain, Kelly, as you're saying. Like, we should try to like peel our way from that and say, all right, I'm going to take the email that I got from Michelet Graham, from Michelet and Matt Managrassi and Kelly, and they're all going to get the same weight. If I want to do my homework because I only have so much time and I have to like judge as I can do it. Or I guess, Kelly, you're also noting, if on the investor side, there's a push to be transparent about how you can be accessed despite network and background.
Right. But also, you're hitting on something here. I'm going to go with this on Chris. I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to go with this, because I'm a tech optimist as well, right? In spite of the hideousness that we see on digital platforms, I am an optimist on this, because for overlooked and undervalued individuals, these platforms, particularly like I think of Twitter and LinkedIn, democratize our access to other people. But you still have to acknowledge the Neanderthal brain and that this isn't just like, oh, gee, with a click and a swipe, I can be connected with someone. How can I step on these platforms? Keep in mind always, I am dealing with other people, and I'm going to invest the time to build a relationship with them. Right. And one of the best examples I sort of think about this is Sinead Burke. Sinead is a contributing editor for British Vogue. She is an activist for equality, particularly in fashion. She is a little person. Here is someone who is got deep knowledge and authority in an industry that does no shape of the design experience, from the stores to the clothing, designs for a little person, okay? But because of the internet and blogging, she's an authority. You know, the first little person to go to the Met Gala, you know, so, and people wanting to have conversations with her because of her vast knowledge. Before the internet, if Sinead Burke had said, hey, you know, Anna Wintour, can I come and talk to you? I know a lot about fashion. I don't think she would have taken the call, right? So, so this is where I'm like, wow, these platforms enable us to build relationships. But those of us, you know, those of us who have been on the outside and not allowed in these networking rooms have to realize this power and how we can use them, right? And those of us who have the privilege need to leave that door open to have those conversations, even if people don't necessarily look at us. So when I think of when I'm networking on Twitter, I'm just looking for people who are decent human beings. I don't care what, you know, I can say I don't care what packaging come in. You come in the package of a jerk, that door is getting closed.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what I hear in there is the communication platforms as they change through time, like from letter writing to phone to email to you know, to any social platform of the moment. That trend line is it continues to get easier to get in front of anybody. But there's two competing effects that come back to whether we're making society any more equitable. One push is, well, if you get 1,000 emails in a day, then you rely on your existing network. I can't physically sort through all of this, and so I go through network. But you also can get in front of someone.
Right.
So I think there's that tension that we have right now, and you know, to maybe bring us back to this concept of how there is a degree of responsibility on whatever side of the power dynamic you might be. If you're an investor, if you're a journalist, if you're whomever, there has to be a bit of like, how and when am I breaking out of my network, which is you spoke to, Kelly. Like you can say, Kelly Hoey can write a lot of books and help a lot of entrepreneurs and founders get better at writing a tighter email or like making sure they're clear in a tweet. But still, you have to be on the investor or the journalist side. You have to be more willing to know that those emails can come from different packages or different people, and they might sound a little bit different. And it's incumbent on both sides, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think what's most important too is I talk about this a lot in just different press stacks is how you present yourself in those emails if you are reaching out, you know, without that warm welcome. So for instance, I always try to tell people when you're reaching out to me, use your subject line like the headline of the story you want me to write. You have to pitch it to me like Kelly already said. You have to pitch it in a certain way where it sounds good. You have to make sure that just as much as you want me to believe that there's value, you have to believe that there's value while you're reaching out to me, and not just because you think you have a cool story. Why do technically readers care about this story? Why do I care about the story enough to write about it and reach back out to you and set up an interview? So definitely when you are reaching out, make sure you do it in the proper way. Even if you're Twitter DMing, I don't hop on Twitter and I'm like, yo, hey, what's up? No, that's not, I don't do that on LinkedIn either. So, you got to do your homework, you got to do your research. See how these people communicate with other people on Twitter. What are they tweeting back? I assume if I'm not following this person and they have their message like that setting on where I can still reach out to them, they want to be talked to. So you just have to make sure that you do your homework and see how these people like to be communicating.
I think that's what people don't want to do. We want fast answers, right? And we want to bypass, I often use with networking, I use the analogy of football. Okay. No quarterback wins the Super Bowl on their own. They have a team. And the number of times someone throws a Hail Mary and it's actually successful versus endless plays and fumbles and pull in special teams. And, come on, you've got to, you got to rely on a team. You've got to figure out, what are the right plays to get there, and you got to invest the time. I often think of, hey, sometimes you do, like thinking, Chris, when you're sort of thinking of, people not having the warm introduction. Yeah, sometimes you got to throw that Hail Mary, but that's just not throwing out a standard email and hoping someone answers it. It's carefully crafted and well researched, and the time is spent in it, so that you actually, land that, that Hail Mary, that pass, it actually lands. But otherwise, you're just, you're wasting people's time.
I want to know here, we have our dear friend Nasir, who's joined us, Village Capital veteran who started his own fund. Welcome to the conversation, Nasir.
Hi, guys. I'm so sorry. We had a fire drill with an investor. This is what happens when you start a new fund. You're flying this thing as you build it, but it's exciting, especially when you have conviction over it. But it's great to be here. Thank you so much, Chris. I've heard nothing but great things about you through Victoria Fram from Village Capital. Thanks for having me.
Oh, great. Yeah, cheers. So, let's get you in here. So we juggled a bit. Michele, technically reporter, was going to moderate. Now she's become a panelist, and I'm in here.
A panelist without the cool headphones. So thank you for joining without the cool headphones, Kelly and Chris.
We got it. But we were having a conversation on how various inputs of building network can both sustain or, I suppose, break down racial inequality. We were just like through the warm intro battle, which I think is a really important one culturally happening in entrepreneur investor communities. We were talking in comparison to journalism, both. If you have an existing white male network and you only take warm intros, you're probably hard to break out of it.
Correct.
But at the same time, it's a really powerful tool. So like we were talking a bit about, you probably have to do the work on both sides of the entrepreneur and the investor, break outside network, because warm intro is going to do some work. Mm-hmm. What's your take on the warm intro? We've had a contested opinion on the.
So first, you recognize that we all have our blind spots, and it's the reason why where capital has gone over the past decade. 80% have gone in 3 places, and then you have 90% of capital being injected into white men that are graduates from 5 on average universities. But the truth is, really, I too have my own blind spots. I went to an HBCU. Today's HBCU day, by the way, and so I'm representing Hampton University. And one can argue that, Nasir, you have blind spots as well. Maybe my pipeline is only 8 HBCU graduates, for example. But I think the 2 key words here is being proactive and being intentional. And obviously, pre-COVID, my saying was that we have to expand our traveling dollars and travel more than 20 miles outside of Menlo Park, Manhattan, and Cambridge. And I bet you, when you proactively do that, those investors will expand their pipeline, will expand their network, that will yield a more inclusive, diverse pipeline of companies, founders who are getting a fair swing at the plate. And I think that's what's happening today. You have investable companies who come from the middle of the country, from Atlanta to Detroit, here in DC, who unfortunately are not getting a fair swing at the plate as it relates to capital and mentorship, media opportunity, resources, et cetera. So we got to democratize access to capital, democratize venture capital. And that's through our inclusive investing strategy at Zeal Capital Partners, a fund that I just launched. it's meant to be an exemplar. Our North Star is that when you have a diverse team, we will over-index our allocation, our capital allocation, to invest in entrepreneurs who often, to my being repetitive here, who don't get a fair swing at the plate. And so that is the strategy that I built after leading AT&T Social Investment Fund, and then prior to that, global head of education at Village Capital. And it works when you proactively do it and you are intentional. Your networks look much bigger, and from that point, you and your dinner table is more expand. I like the term expanding our dinner table, which is from a social unrest, but that's what we have to do more is expand our dinner table to really understand each other. That's another conversation. But I do think they coincide with each other. So I'll pause there. Hopefully that from an investor lens, that adds some color.
I love the comment about blind spots. It reminds me of a dinner with and I had the good fortune of sitting next to Alan Patrikoff, and he made the comment about an investment that he overlooked, because you talk about a blind spot. And this, guy from Seattle had this idea for a chain of coffee shops. And Alan was like, I got diners on every corner in New York, and I got bodegas. Why do I need? And so he turned down Howard Schultz and investing in Starbucks. Like, we have blind spots, based on where we were raised and where we live, and it's exactly your point. Like, if we don't recognize we have blind spots, if we turn off our creativity and our curiosity buttons, and we think we know everything, that's where you're massively in danger, not just with your own fund, your own life, your own career. So
and Kel, to go back to your earlier point on, the disproportionate demographic of people who hold patents, the embedded assumption, and I think a lot of the technical reporting that we end up doing is not, though I don't think it needs to be put in this context. You can see a lens of deeply misunderstanding racial inequality by saying what an enormous economic opportunity we're missing. Because either you assume 80% of all patentable ideas come from white men in their 40s. I suppose you could think that. Or you could say, holy hell, how many ideas we're missing out on that could have enormous economic impact. And that, I suppose, is that's the incumbent view of why we are aiming to try to break down what network effect can look like.
Right. There's a great study, and they refer to it, and there is the loss of Einsteins. Because of not having access, because of not having exposure, because of not having role models. I mean, part of this study that we're talking about, the lost Einsteins, you could say because of socioeconomic, but also the very much importance with respect to gender. So that women who became inventors, it was because someone in the family, and they overly indexed in inventing in the same area. Right. So if you're, not only the same area, but it was gender was required as well. So if your mom was an engineer and worked for NASA, the chances of you doing that as well. Right. And inventing in that, not, I'm now going to go invent over in, heart medical devices or something, something else. So those role models and exposure, right, is absolutely essential and critical. And it's also one of the things where I think, we spend a lot of time, and as I think we should spend a lot of time talking about why things aren't there. I think it's also critical that we highlight who is there, because even if there's one, even if there's a handful, right? Think about the importance of the movie Hidden Figures. Right, we got to shine a bright light on this. I say the absence. Not just the absence, but the people. The scant few people are there, because that might start to change a few other people to see what is possible.
Chris, can I underscore Kelly's point? She's alluding to something I think is really important as we think about. I spent the past 4 years here in DC on a school board, and one of the things I've learned is that our children have an incredible creativity, entrepreneurial spirit when they're young. And for some odd reason, we tend to lose it when they get in high school and matriculate into college. And that's why I think it's important that, how we think about, supporting kids, whether it's like I'm trying to pull together like an incubator at the elementary level, just to ensure that kids are constantly thinking through their entrepreneurial idea. We have Nefty that's been around for a while, that helps students really think about their business model, how to think about patents. So just ensuring, I think that the insurance that kids are not losing that creativity, and we see that loss often in communities of color, low wealth communities, where they don't have the resources and the ability to continue that idea or that pitch competition to help them realize that they're building an actual business. And so I think that speaks to the future innovators conversation. And as an investor, and especially looking to support, invest in founders that of color, and we want to see those numbers, increase. We have to dig into our education system to ensure that kids who want to be the next unicorn company are realizing their full potential as early as grammar school.
I think it's critical, because if you're not hearing
we are
if you're not hearing it if you're not hearing it home, if you're not hearing like you can do this, right? If you're not surrounded by a community that sees this other possibility, they're going to, go back to Neanderthal brains, Chris. They're going to herd you towards safety, right? Safety is get a W-2 job. Safety is keep your head down, don't rock the boat, all that kind of stuff. And this is where, you need this other network, this other community that sees this bigger possibility and potential for you.
So we are at time. We did this a little bit differently than planned, but it worked. Thank you guys for this conversation. We may end up having a follow-up. It's 2020, man. I just like it's 2020.
That's all you need to say.
So we're at
Use for everything.
We're at time here. We get a break, and then we have at 4:00. We have our closing keynotes. Guy Raz of NPR and TED Radio Hour fame. Stick around and have that. We'll be back, and this time you'll go to the stage function right at 4 p.m. to start. Thank you, Nasir. Thank you, Kelly. We will follow up and more conversation to be had. Thank you, guys. Thanks,
Thank
Michelle.
you.
Be well. Be safe.
Yeah.